Let's now go to our third speaker of the morning, who's Andreu Ulied from MCRIT in Barcelona, Catalonia, where they've been doing a wide range of work on a territorial reference framework for Europe. Andreu has presented this work in a number of distinguished forums, and he's now going to present it for us. Andreu, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Greg. I know you are going to make a wonderful synthesis of anything I will say, so I'm relaxed, even though I didn't sleep much yesterday. So we will begin working in a project called Towards a Territorial Reference Framework for Europe. I keep changing.
Yes.
This is the green
one? Top one. The green one. Yeah.
Okay. Our mission statement is like that, facilitating a foresight process towards a territorial agenda post-2020. These are the companies we will work and the key persons on the Strategic Advisory Forum. So it's MCRIT, the European Policy Center, which is the first time working on ESPON, and we needed them very much. Special Foresight, Politecnico di Milano, and then chairing the Strategic Advisory Forum, Professor Jacek Zlachta, and Marjorie Jouen from the Jacques Delors Institute. This is the, maybe I will remove this so I can see more easily. So this is the working plan we have. So basically is based on the one hand on facilitating a participatory process with a number of events, and on the other hand developing alternative scenarios and policy options to be discussed on these events that most of you will be invited. Let me now in this presentation briefly introduce you a number of thoughts, thinking on the baseline and scenario analysis. And I will say just something about the policies, but I will leave this mostly to Jacek and Alison Hunter that will participate on the panel afterwards. So about the unexpected events we are living, I will focus on three unexpected, let's call unexpected events with major territorial impacts. The number one is the economic crisis from 2008 that I don't know if it's over or we are just used to live in this crisis. And I will focus mostly on the implication on the south and the east of Europe. Then the political crisis, the Brexit, which is the most important one. And then the humanitarian crisis, which maybe is the more troubling one because it's affecting the European core values. All of these crises will have lasting impacts, and they have a lot of territorial implications. I will spend a few minutes on this map, which is one of my favorites from ESPON. This was made by Professor Camagna and Professor Capello from the Politecnico of Milano in the worst moment of the crisis in 2010, 2011. Maybe for them, for our colleagues, was the best moment of the crisis because it was very exciting. These are economists working on the meat of a crisis on a modeling. But for the ordinary people, it was the worst moment in 2010, 2011. So in this map, you see the GDP in average in Europe was growing 1.9, which is not bad because this map, this forecast assumes the austerity policies that were in place. So it was a baseline. So 1.9 means that the more developed European regions keep growing at above 2%. So it's a map showing increasing disparities. In red, you see regions in the south that, according to this forecast, will likely will lose 1-2 decades of growth. In pale blue, you see regions which are growing 1.5%, mostly in Eastern European rural, sparsely populated regions. In the east part of Europe, you see in dark blue, mostly capital cities which are growing above 2%. Anyway, they are not converging with the European average, which is 2%. So it's a map of increasing disparities in the south and in the east. It's a map showing kind of the core periphery paradigm back. So it was not, you know, the message of this map was, I would say, controversial when it was published. Afterwards, we were lucky, let's say, because the austerity policies were relaxed. because some reforms were carried out in the labor market, meaning lower salaries, meaning worse working conditions, but that was good for the microeconomics. And also we are lucky, so the energy prices at world level were down, so the oil price was down. So the crisis was not that hard, but almost, in the sense that unemployment got hard, was very high, above 20% in some regions, above 50% for youngsters. We had less social expenditure because of the austerity policies and less public investment, precisely when it was more needed. This means that informal economy, maybe in the southern regions, now is maybe 25% of the GDP, so you have to take into account that the GDP in this map is maybe 70% of the real one, on the real life of people. And this has social and political conflicts linked, obviously. Maybe I'm going back to Marx again, in the sense that the economy is, maybe is the first thing to look at, not the only one. What are the cohesion policy implications for this? Because after this, we cannot think in the same way on cohesion policies. There are contradictory impacts of cohesion policies. On the one hand, let's say in Poland, they had investments, public investments, because of the co-financing of the cohesion funds during the worst moment of the crisis. This was very positive, especially for the large cities. And in Spain, to tell you another example, is completely different, because we believe that we had overspending in the years before the crisis. At the same time, we had a real estate bubble. So maybe cohesion funds exacerbated the crisis even. So we see Germany. In Germany, it happened something curious, which is because of the savings of people from the rest of Europe going to finance German bonds. Maybe Germany saved, according to some think tanks, 1 billion euros in 4 years, which is 1/3 of the whole cohesion funds. Which a lot of imbalances happening all around Europe. So need for fiscal harmonization, banking union, and so on. So things are going to be different. And this map was kind of for me, is kind of a good iconic image of this moment. It was also a crisis of legitimacy of European institutions and so-called technocrats. Here is Mr. Blanchard, chief economist of the International Monetary Fund, that said forecasters significantly underestimated the increase of unemployment and the decline of domestic demand associated with fiscal consolidation. So basically, we got our multipliers wrong, so we didn't understand well the impact of the austerity policies and so on. And, it's easy to create this story of we the people against the bureaucrats, technocrats, the cosmopolitan elite. Actually, it's a paradox because, these persons are not that bad in the sense that they are competent and they are even honest, as Mr. Blanchard demonstrated, saying that they were wrong. I like to say that our colleagues from Milano got the multipliers right. That's good to know. I mean, for me. The second crisis I want to talk about, which is related to this one, is the political crisis. This map is wonderful, it's very famous. Sure, you know that blue are cities in England, the whole Scotland, and municipalities in the border between Northern Ireland and the rest of Ireland and Belfast, which voted Remain. And in red, you have municipalities, mostly in England, that voted Leave. It's amazing how maps, geographic maps based on political geography, explain cultural mindsets, because we have seen this kind of maps also in Poland, also in France, also in Spain. And also, I mean, all questions like cities versus countryside, global, anywhere versus local, somewhere, younger generations between older generations, even utopia against retropia, all these questions, we can make these questions in every different country. And they are old and new questions at the same time. Retropia comes from the last book by Simon Bauman, and he said in his book, in the choice between the paradise lost and the promised land, British prefer paradise lost, which is kind of a symptom of our moment. We can make the same questions on Scotland. I like this picture because there is a European flag here. Also, there is a Catalan flag here. Meaning, this is not nationalism like in the 19th century. This is something different we have to think about. Even in the debates, they were talking about the well-being of people more than about the traditions or whatever. So we have to rethink what is the meaning of these processes. This was a picture from my window. This is my street. So I was concerned because my mother, which is 82 years old, was there. So, you know, what is interesting is that everybody was using the mobile phone to create this effect of light. I remember 25 years ago, everybody used the lighter. Nobody smokes right now, and everybody has a... Maybe this is more important than actually the reason for the demonstration, that people are using mobile phones instead of lighters. This changes everything. An interesting paradox. I like this map because it's like everybody, all the citizens in Europe, you know, showing the mobile phone. So it's the light of people. But there is something which is really interesting from this crisis, which is for the first time in history, we have two women as measured in Madrid and Barcelona. Huge change. The second important thing is that they represent these young, urban, well-educated populations, which are cosmopolitan. They are new in politics. They belong to new parties. And they agree on the solution of the conflict. And both, they are in opposition of the Spanish and the Catalan government, which is something very relevant. So cities are different from countries in this sense. So we have to think in a different way, many different aspects. Also, these two women agree with the demonstrations in favor of the refugees. So you can see people demonstrating in favor of self-determination, which also demonstrate in favor of welcoming refugees. So again, this is not 19th century nationalism. This is something different. We have to think twice what it is. And this is the most important crisis for Europe, more important than the previous one I mentioned, I believe, because it's touching our core values as Europeans. This is what is happening. You know, Germany is very different from the other countries. I will say it's much clever because aging and lack of demographic problems are going to be solved in this way in the long term, even though they may have problems in the short term. You know, we have officially 3,000 people dying crossing the Mediterranean Sea. Maybe the real figure is 10,000 people dying to cross the Mediterranean Sea. And I think we have to include at least the whole Mediterranean in the ESPON maps. This is something I always tell people. We have to include the whole Mediterranean because we are living, you know, Tripoli is closer, Tripoli and Benghazi are closer to Marseille than Brussels. So we have to think about the geography matters. And this is the most important thing, more important than the previous one. You can forget everything I said and just focus on this one, because it's the crisis of who we are, what is the human being. Because you don't know if this hand belongs to a human being or to a humanoid. And this is changing everything. Maybe this will change. We were talking yesterday, maybe in 2-3 decades, we don't know. But the way we talk on, let's say, on smart cities. So some people say before we were living on the farms, now in cities, in the future we will live in internet. So you imagine smart cities like millions of small eyes, sensors everywhere, surveying us, watching what we are doing, sending data and information on us to a server which is taking optimal decisions. So I have a friend that used to say that only robots will be happy in the smart city of the future, only robots. If you are not a robot, you will have problems because you will make mistakes all the time. he says something I don't know. Okay, I'm going to say what he's also. No, I'm not going to say this is not.
You've got 39 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I'm going to move to the second and last part, which is just 3 slides, just introduction to the panel. So, everything I said is useful, and many things that we're talking on these 10 events in relation of the future of Europe is going to be useful to create the basis for the new territorial agenda. And what kind of animal should be this territorial agenda post-2020? To be useful, to deal with these problems, challenges, opportunities, and many others. This is the first question we have. This is related to the vision. So in the previous territorial agenda, there were a number of aims. The first one is promote polycentricity and balanced territorial development. We have to think what this means for the next decade. The goal is probably the same because it's the European way. We understand cities this way. We don't like megalopolis of 20 million people. We like networked cities. We have to think what this means on the next decade. And maybe we have to introduce new ideas like co-development with the neighboring countries. Maybe we have to explicitly recognize that I think Russia is 100 kilometers from here. So Russia exists. And also Libya exists. And we depend on them for the energy a lot. And the last image I have is about policies. So the most difficult question is how we improve the integration, the coordination between sectorial, pretending to be just-in-time policies and integrated place-based policies. And there are 3 questions that Greg probably will explain much better than me and will ask you afterwards, which is how to introduce multi-level territorial cooperation in the framework of mainstream European sectoral investment programs, planning and implementing place-based integrated European investment programs in close cooperation with cities and regions. And the third question, providing European support to local, regional, and development strategies. They are maybe not in the same direction, so it's one or the other. So this is a key question we have to investigate on this coming 18 months and all these events. And we will ask you to help us, to provide us a first insight on this. So this is just the last image telling you what we are going to do the next 18 months. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreu.